Britain's royal family is under attack from one of its own. In his new book, Spare, Prince Harry gives his side of the rifts in a family that used to pride itself on keeping its inner workings secret. But perhaps among the most damaging and possibly dangerous revelations are Harry's nonchalant description of killing Taliban fighters in Afghanistan and claims of possible racism towards his wife, Meghan Markle. So, how much harm is being done to one of the world's most famous families? Welcome to the programme. I'm Philip Hampshire. In his memoir, Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex, puts himself on display for all to see. Among revelations of family feuds, physical fights with his brother William and drug-taking in his younger years, Harry also says he killed 25 fighters in Afghanistan like chess pieces while he was a helicopter pilot there. Adding that use of language to previous allegations of racism, there are some who suggest he may be revealing a little more than he meant to about Britain's royal family. So, let's discuss this further. Joining us on the panel is Shola Mos-Shogbamimu, who is a lawyer and political women's rights activist. Meanwhile, we also have Richard Fitzwilliams, who's a royal commentator, joining us from London. Richard, if I can turn to you first. The book's only been out for a very short period of time. Have you had a chance to read it, grab some excerpts from it? What are your views on what's been said?
Well, we've certainly had an idea of what's been said because, as you know, copies were leaked and this involved The Guardian getting an exclusive, but also in Spain, newspapers got early extracts. I have just bought Spare and I'm certainly reading very good prose. J.R. Mourinho is the ghostwriter. But regarding the explosive nature of it, this has been something that I think has transfixed certainly the media, and it would be very interesting to get people's responses as they read the book. This was always a book that I felt ought not to have been written. It's far too soon to write an autobiography. Harry has written something, putting it mildly, from the heart, and together with the book, we have to take into account that a month ago there was the Netflix docuseries and several trailers for that, and also there's been the interview with Tom Bradby on ITV and also with Anderson Cooper on 60 Minutes and Good Morning America. So in fact, there'll be even more to come. So this is a form of a media circus. It is also a form, as far as I can see it, of an attempt by the Sussexes to make it absolutely clear to the royal family that they want an apology for the way they were treated, or perceived that they were treated, when they were senior working members of the royal family, and that is not going to happen. It raises very, very basic issues of trust, whether anyone would trust Prince Harry after this. How could you reconcile when whatever you said might well appear in the media, either written or in an interview? It also begs as to whether or not and to what extent this is monetized, because they've got contracts, but the only reason the Sussexes have contracts is that they are members of the royal family, as is the world's most high-profile royal family. So from that point of view, this is their particular lever. But what they've done, I think, is to harm it by the extracts that were released in earlier days. We've had several days of it now, and also interviews which I think have been extremely destructive. I think Harry has moved on a level whereby one can tremendously sympathize with him for the tragic loss of his mother, which has haunted him all his life.
Richard, let's get on to that in just a moment. If I can bring in Shola here. Shola, thank you very much for coming in to join us today. What are your impressions of the things that Harry has been saying about his life, his experiences with the royal family, his marriage?
Well, I beg to differ to Richard, because the reality is that Harry had no choice but to write this book, but to respond, to give a resounding rebuttal to every other book that's been written about him, every other article, every speculation, every word that's been put out there about him for the last 38 or so years of his life and about his wife. He was put in a position where I don't think he had a choice, not because he's being forced, but he's taking responsibility of his own story. Should he have written this book? Heck yes. It's his story, it's his narrative. Should he get an apology for what we all know was a betrayal by his family through their silence and their lack of protection and defense of him and his wife? Yes. If the family, as has been said by the fellow panel speaker, that the family would never apologize, that shows a weakness of character. Because why would you want people in power, which is what the royal family are, who cannot, one, identify when they've done something wrong and apologize if they cannot take care of one of their own when it comes to trauma, mental health, the marriage to a biracial woman, and the racist attacks against her? Why in heaven's name would anybody think that the royal family represents them? I most definitely don't think that they represent me, because it means that they're paying lip service to the issue of racial justice, mental health, because if you can't take care of your own, you sure as heck cannot speak or, take care of me. And, to the point around monetizing, excuse me, please, can I just point this out? The royal family has been benefiting, whether the fact that it might not be money, they've been benefiting in other ways by leaking things to the press about Harry and Meghan. Think about that. The fact that you can't put money on it does not mean that they have not, they've not benefited significantly by shaming and failing Harry and Meghan. And this is Harry's point, that all of you that are saying, you shouldn't say anything, you're being destructive. No, he's not being destructive. His family was destructive, first of all. And I think that he's very kind, quite frankly, to say, look, of course I want reconciliation. He's not talking about a reconciliation with an institution. He's talking about reconciliation with his father and his brother. Now, if his father and brother feel the same love, then really people should just get around the table, give themselves a few hugs, because what is happening in the royal family is no different from many other families. I think people watching and listening to Harry will find him very compelling. They'll find him brutally honest about his own flaws, about his own experiences, and people talking about, well, you're breaching privacy. No, he's not. He's talking about his own life and people who have interacted with him in his own life. It's well within his right to say, this happened with me, with my dad. This is why I do what I do. This happened to me with my brother. This is what happened with my wife. This is why I had to make the decisions that I made. Can't you understand that? And he's not looking for anybody's applause. I don't think Harry's looking for people's applause or that their agreement. Whether you want to applaud or agree with him is your own business. He's saying, I have had enough. I'm going to tell my story. Accept it, don't accept it. I don't care. But this is the truth. So from now on, and for the purposes of history, next time you hear something about Harry said, please refer to my book, refer to my interviews, refer to what I've said and what I've not said. So I think it's an excellent thing that he did. Of course, there were certain points that he raised in the interview that I don't necessarily agree with.
Well, we'll get on to those in a second, because I just want to bring in here and say, well, yes, I can understand where you're coming from in saying that he wants to tell his side of the story. Almost did a Freudian slip there where I said he wanted to sell...
Was that on purpose?
Yeah, he wanted to sell his side of the story, which, of course, is also what he's doing. There is a monetary incentive here.
So
because the royal family is also an institution and they have raised people within that institution on the grounds that you don't leak. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
Right,
you don't leak what goes on behind the doors.
They do it. This is Harry's point. We have a motto where we don't complain and explain. They're busy complaining and explaining by leaking stuff to the press through palace sources. People, please.
Richard, can I pass that across to you? Is it fair what Shola's saying, that this is like a game of PR tennis and this is merely Harry batting the ball back over the net towards the royal family?
Well, this is certainly, as was clear from my opening comments, not what I see. What profoundly worries me about this is, of course, everyone has their story, and if he wants to tell how he lost his virginity or he wants to tell how he experimented with drugs, that's up to him. But if you tell stories about others, you invade their privacy. So to me, it's hypocritical when you say, we, as the Sussexes have for years, want our privacy, and then you decide how and where you will share information. Of course, it's linked to money, at least as I understand it, because they've got a contract with Netflix, which of course produces The Crown as well, and that is supposedly worth $100 million. Also, the Spotify contracts, and also with the current Random House Publishing. And the only reason they get those is because they are members of the royal family. Now, the allegations in this, particularly taking Shola's point about the press and the press coverage, also social media, and what can come from that. Harry has specifically said, but there has not been evidence. The only evidence that I've heard has been specifically that he mentioned the incident about the bridesmaids' dresses, and that was an incident between Meghan and Catherine, and there's been dispute over who cried. He has not given any evidence other than to say that in his view, the press, and he seems to lump the tabloids, it's particularly them that he loathes, with the broadsheets. The press is some form of extension of the palace public relations. That is complete nonsense. It's not. We have a free press. It can have extreme, and there are appalling aspects to the British press, and in social media there are absolutely shocking aspects to it. But the facts of the matter are that the palace, so far as other royals are concerned, Charles has had bad press, Camilla certainly has had bad press, Catherine's had bad press, and William from time to time. So the Sussexes are certainly not unique. They are part of the royal family that goes back over 1,000 years, bar Cromwell's protectorate continuously, and it's part of our DNA. And I cannot see a time when the British people will want a republic, which I hope we will never have. What I do see is betrayal in the way Harry has behaved in this, and the book I've just started to read here, and I read the extracts, you're just taking an irresponsible decision, say, that who advises him? He decides on his second tour of duty in Afghanistan, he reveals the fact that he killed 25 Taliban.
So hold on, Richard. Let's get on to the 25 deaths in a second. Shola, I'm assuming you're going to step in here at this point.
Please, because with all due respect, I think your summation thus far is what is utter nonsense. We saw the coverage of the press about Meghan. You do not need him to provide any more evidence than what was presented before you. We know for a fact that every single one of those palace sources comes from the palace. And there's no way these sources would speak without the approval, complicity of those who run the palaces, whether it's William, Kensington Palace, Charles, and of course, the Queen was alive for most of this time. And let us also understand that when you want to talk about betrayal, as far as I'm concerned, his family betrayed him first. They have never once in 6 years, never once, put out a statement, said anything or done anything to defend Meghan Markle against the racist coverage, the misogynist and sexist coverage against her. You cannot possibly compare what Meghan Markle has gone through to Kate or to Camilla. Absolutely not. I mean, the race element he talked about in the Netflix documentary is alive and well. This is the root of the problem. Only Prince Harry came out in 2016 to talk about this issue. He called out the press about the racist undertones, right? And when you talk about, oh, it's irresponsible for him to have done this book, for him to be talking about ABC, I mean, there's precedence for this. Prince Charles gave an interview about his own childhood. He also criticized his parents. And I believe that along the line, maybe it was Queen Elizabeth's grandfather or so, who also wrote an autobiography. This is nothing new. It is not wrong for him to talk about his life. He did not breach anybody's privacy. His privacy has been breached by every single person writing books, by his family leaking stories about him. What he's doing is owning the narrative. So when people want to sit on, oh, he's making money, I'm sorry, why shouldn't he make money? Why should he, no, hold
in
on.
the book,
Why should he not make money, people? Those of you who want to point fingers, oh, it's 100 million. Are you jealous? Where's his envy coming from? What do you want to do? You want to strip him of his titles? You want to see him begging on the street to prove what?
in the book, in previous interviews, he's made allegations against the family to one degree or another. I'm going to classify it with the probably overly harsh language. He's described his family more or less as racist. However, when he was interviewed very recently in an interview, It was an ITV interview. He said, no, I've never said that my family was racist. He said, I would describe them as having unconscious biases.
Right, and what he did was try to then make a distinction by saying unconscious bias is different from racism. He's absolutely wrong. Absolutely so, because racial bias is not the absence of racism. It is the presence and evidence of racism. And I understand that Prince Harry is on a journey, because as a white privileged man, which he has also admitted, he has only experienced racism by proxy because of the racism against his biracial wife. He's on a journey of learning, I get that. So he needs to take his own words, unpick his learning, learn and grow. The racist concerns, not curiosity, people. We all have curiosities. When I was having my kids, every single one of them, I said to them out there in my belly, don't come out to your father's nose. Not because I have concerns about his nose, but I think I have a better nose. But of course, they came out with different versions of his nose. But no, I did not have concerns about it. The words we heard was concerns about the color of his skin. That is racist. And then he also tries to downplay Lady Hots's racial microaggression towards Ngozi Fulani in interrogating her about whether or not she's British. Is that what she meant? No harm. That's disingenuous. And I think that he genuinely thinks that there is a distinction between bias and racism. The only reason you're racist is because of your racial bias. The only reason people are anti-Semitic is because of the anti-Semitic bias. Bias is the root. It's what feeds and triggers that action. And people go, oh, but it's unconscious now. That's a get out of jail free card. We need to stop. That's just whitewashing the state, right? People are not comatose when they're being, anti-Semitic or racist or Islamophobic. They're not like, oh, out of this world, and they don't know what they're doing. They know exactly what they're doing. So he's absolutely wrong. He needs to unpick his learning. What they did was racist. Now, he may not be, maybe he doesn't feel like he's yet in a position to call out his family as, demonstrating racist behavior, and he just wants the unconscious bias. That's his business. The rest of us that see what it is and we know what racism is, he better listen up and learn.
Okay, but he has said some things in this biography that are perhaps a little foolish to have said out loud. And let me give you an example of one of them. Here's a quote that we have from one of the former British Army officer.
I think Prince Harry's comments about Afghanistan are ill-judged and potentially harmful both to him, but also to the British Army as a whole. And in the first case, I think that he's already under security threat, but specifying and spelling out so publicly that he's killed 25 Taliban, although that's nothing to be ashamed of. In fact, it's something to be proud of. It won't, it will refocus and I think probably re-energize those people who had in the past thought of taking revenge against him for doing so. So I think that's a pretty serious implication for his personal security.
Richard, so you heard that clip there from a former British Army officer. You mentioned, I'm sorry I cut you off earlier when you were talking about the 25 people in Afghanistan, but this is why I wanted to come back to you with it. Was that not an extremely foolish thing for him to put a number to?
The issue of the comment that he made about Afghanistan, we know he spent 10 years in the army. We know also he was a very fine soldier in both tours in 2007 and 2012-13. But the specific quote that has caused a lot of anger amongst military sources was also referred to the Taliban taking them out like, quote, as though they were chess pieces on a board. And this has implied that they were not humans and so forth. So it's a very, very silly, very unwise. And with regarding security, I mean, why did he say this in his memoir or allow this to be written by his ghostwriter? I mean, the point is, it is, I think, very, very unwise.
Shola, what did you make of him making that announcement? I think most people, if they, they probably wouldn't think about it at all. But if they were to sit down and think about it, would say, well, he was a helicopter pilot in Afghanistan. He probably did kill people. Putting a figure on it, bit silly.
Yeah, well, my first thought was that initially when it came out because of the leak from Spain, I thought, well, shouldn't we understand what the context? In what context did he make this statement? And I think that is important. Yes, I did think. I don't know why you put a number on the number of people you've killed. And as a soldier on both sides, I do expect that those soldiers did kill people, right? And that is expected of those who are recruited to participate in war, as long as they're not killing innocent civilians. So I'm not sure why exactly you chose to put a number on it. But what I would say, I mean, to the point earlier about Invictus Games, Harry's the one that founded that the Invictus Games, and I don't think it takes away from the credibility or legitimacy of what he's done with Invictus Games or his role in the army. While people may question why he put a number on it, I think, again, let's remember, this is his story. Now, I may not agree, and you may not agree with certain things he's put in there or he said about it, but he's letting people, he's speaking his mind as he chooses to. Yes, people may say that, well, should you have? But honestly, it's not, I would say it's not the worst case scenario. Would I have put a number on the number of people that I've killed? Would I have even talked about it necessarily? Me personally, probably no, because but I also recognize that his whole period in Afghanistan was when things started to change for him. He started to get either the healing or the growth he needed. It helped him to address some of the rage he had been addressing because he was able to serve in a particular, he was able to do things about issues that were bigger than him. So that was the whole process. Maybe that was one of the reasons he put a number on it. But
you think
again,
there was a certain catharsis in there?
I don't know. Again, this is up to Harry. When he puts in a number of it, I think, look, those who have raised concerns about security issues for him, those security issues, I think, were there. The Taliban, I hear some people say that the Taliban are now taking the moral high ground. They never had the moral high ground in the first place. They were the enemy. And to many people, they're still the enemy. So I think it's more, well, you know what? As a soldier, I think people expected that you hurt, injured, or potentially killed people. You did not necessarily have to put a number on it. But again, that is not going to be the worst thing to have come out here. People will have their opinions on a lot of things that he's shared. But again, this is his life, and he's just telling it as it is.
Richard, if I can cross over to you. One of the things Harry has said, you've already mentioned, is that he would like to get an apology out of the royal family. I'm sure the royal family would immediately turn that around and say, well, actually, first we'd like an apology from you, we think. Is that what you think the royal family would say to him, or do you think the royal family will just ignore it and try and rise above it?
My feeling is that they won't actually issue a statement. They did after Oprah, most especially with the Queen saying that some recollections may vary, because we know that quite a lot of what was said on Oprah, whether they didn't marry twice, for example, or, subsequently did Meghan lose her passport, and a whole variety of issues in this that were clearly untrue. And also there's the matter of the truth and their truths. But without going into the Oprah interview in depth, the facts of the matter seem to me here that the options the royals have are to do nothing and say nothing in a dignified silence, but that does mean that a lot of allegations will have remained. He talks about an assault by William. He talks about what happened at Prince Philip's funeral. Throughout the book, there are attacks on various members of the royal family, and in an interview he said that Camilla, he called her dangerous and talked about her briefing against him and so forth. The whole variety of things that they will find deeply offensive and very, very hurtful. What to do? There is the talk of removing titles. Now that, if you remove the dukedom, that would require an act of parliament. The only act at the moment, the Titles Deprivation Act of 1917, was used for treason, and that obviously doesn't apply. There is also the possibility of the allegations about bullying that almost surfaced in the ITV interview with Tom Bradby, but didn't quite. Now, Meghan strongly denies this, but the facts of the matter are apparently that there have been these allegations since 2018 that Meghan bullied members of staff. Now, whether or not the palace didn't publish their report into this, they might. I think it unlikely. Also, it's possible that a non-disclosure agreement with those individuals concerned could be lifted. But my own feeling is that what will occur, remember the coronation is in May, supposedly Harry and Meghan are being asked to it. However, whether the invitation hasn't been sent yet, will they come? Issues of security are raised there, and he has raised them regarding every visit that he's made to the United Kingdom. But so far as the response is concerned, however unsatisfactory it may be, my feeling is that they will continue to do nothing. That would be my bet.
Richard Fitzwilliams, thank you very much for joining me. Shola Mos-Shogbamimu, thank you very much for joining me as well. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just head over to YouTube and search for Roundtable TRT World. But for now, from me here and all of the team, goodbye, and thank you for watching.